think we've
Good
got
evening, everyone.
good evening, and I'm going to uh, stop sharing for a second. And we've got a lot of people, which is good. And what we're going to do is this is this is an article I wrote a few years ago um, when we were first starting to study the this thing I call Mendaciology, which is the study of human lies. What's interesting is that uh, the best way I have to explain it is that there's no literature in most of computational cognitive science, AI, on getting machines to lie, and and also how the human brain lies. I mean, not how the computation actually works inside the human brain that makes it easy to lie. It actually allows you to intend to lie and get away with it, and so forth and so on. Um, and the probable reason for that, the reason for the lack of literature over the years, is that if a graduate student came to me and said he wanted to do his um, dissertation on lying or deceit, I would tell him to find another subject, that he will destroy his career if he does a dissertation on deceit or lying. Okay. And any self-respecting professor in any university that was trying to get tenure, if he tried to get tenure by um, telling people how people's brains know how to lie, he would not get tenure. They would turn him down. They would say, "You're crazy. Okay, you're not allowed to study that." Okay. The now you can study it, and you can write books about it and whatever all you want, but you'll never get tenure at this university because we don't want to be known as the lying, how to lie university. Okay, that's would be a bad thing. So as a consequence, there's been very little, if any, literature. And what I decided to do was to study lying because I no longer have to get tenure or anything. And I don't have to care what other people think. I will study what I think is important to study. And so I came up with this name, Mendaciology, for the computational cognitive neuroscience of lying, and started getting serious about it. And what I found was what scientists usually find when they study something that nobody's really studied before, this beautiful empty field of discovery. And it was just like you could go out in the field and pick a flower, and every flower you picked was a beautiful thing that nobody had ever written about before or understood. Okay. And so it was just like I was making huge amounts of progress in very short periods of time, understanding how human brains compute on lying, deceit, cheating, and so forth and so on. And uh, so that's what caused this report to happen. The Internet Toward Truth and Lies, because what it said, what the site said, was that a very old understood practice called enforced moderated dialogue is the only cure, is the only way you can control lying and deceit. And it's been understood for thousands of years since but kind of implicitly. But it's the reason courts were created. It's the reason that the United States democracy has this balance of power where each division of power, for example, the uh, executive, the court system, the House of Representatives, the Senate, um, each of them have very structured, um, enforced, moderated dialogue to reach conclusions. And it also said why social media was so destructive, which is social media does not enforce or moderate dialogue at all. In fact, what they claim is dialogue is really not dialogue at all. It's people feel lying to each other. They're just blabbering, and nobody is in a situation where they have to analyze with other people the deceits and lies. And so the that what that says is the fundamental problem with social media is precisely that there is no enforced moderated dialogue, no matter what the social media people are saying. They're imagining it. They're saying, well, it's allowed. That's not the definition of enforced. Okay. The court system is enforces dialogue and it structures it. The parliament enforces dialogue and it structures it. The an executive branch enforces dialogue and it structures it. There are things you can do and things that you can't do, and you're not allowed to do certain things in theory. So that's the um, uh, so that's what the truth court is all about: is to give people a chance to um, engage in dissecting suspected lies and truths to see what other people think under a set of questions that are universal, um, and to help people see how other people think. So that's what this is all about. And this paper I wrote was a paper that illustrates that the human brain is really, and we know this now today pretty much. We don't know the exact numbers here, but we have approximately 100 billion neurons between your ears. There's in there is about 100 billion neurons. That is a very large number. That is the number of stars that are in the Milky Way. The and then for each of those stars in your between your ears, there are 3,000 on average, 3,000 connections for each star, 3,000 connections to other stars. In other words, that each star is connected to 3,000 other stars. And for each of those connections, uh, which is 3,000 times 100 billion, for each, which is 300 trillion, there is a compute point. And that compute point is what we call an active perceptron, which can recognize something. And a property of the ability of the brain to recognize something is also there's a symmetric property, which is it can recognize something in such a way that it brought it about. The brain brings it about. In other words, motor action takes place, and what's recognized is that the motor action did take place. You did do that with your hands. Okay. Uh, and so we know that we know how the computation works in that sense to both control everything you can perceive, everything you can understand, whether it's a story or the background color on a video. And we know that it can also cause actions that your brain can, in perceiving, in causing to be perceived can cause your motor system to do things or you to have a physical impact on reality. And so we know that. When we know how that works, we've known that since probably around 1990, because we could prove all that. So that's what this is. This is kind of all about. Is what it says is, and we can also measure. We can do what's called fMRI, which is do blood flow studies, and EEG, which is electrical activity studies on people when they're reading or talking or doing anything that a person can do. And we can watch how many neurons are interacting with each other and where they're doing it in the brain when you're engaged in any activity that a human can do. And we've now been doing those studies for probably 15 or 20 years in detail, where the size of the area that we can see as distinct is on the order of the bad systems can see on the order of the cubic millimeter of cells, which is a very, very large number of those 100 billion cells, believe it or not. And so we can watch what happens. And one of the things that we see is that any sentence that you say, for example, the cook threw the knife, okay, any sentence that you can hear will light up about 90 million neurons with 3,000 connections each. And all of those processing units, what they're doing is they're processing what you see in natural language as predications or context, what people call context, predication context, which is where lies come from. And so what's going on is you've got massive numbers of a massive amount of thought that's completely unconscious that's going on when you just hear a sentence. And there are 2 or 3 different ways to prove that massive computation is going on. One way is in people's ability to detect anomalies. So if something, for example, if you're watching a football game, and all of a sudden the ball goes dead, in other words, it loses air, you will notice that anomaly immediately, even though programming a machine to notice such an anomaly is really hard to manually program a machine. But the brain can do it just like instantly, because the brain is actually computing on the status of that ball the whole time while you're thinking about what the guy is kicking or whether he made the goal or not. Okay. But your brain is computing all these other predications simultaneously. So that's one way that we know that there's this huge amount of parallel computation going on. The emotional responses people make is another way. And then a third way is in lies. And so what this article is about is telling 10 lies in 4 words. And what the science says is I can probably tell 1,000 lies in 4 words or 1,000,000 lies in 1 word. Okay. It is very possible. Okay. The brain is perfectly capable of being deceived that massively. Okay. And this is just an illustration of this paper is just an illustration of that. So what I'm going to do is go, and another way to is that Freud was right. Most of computation is unconscious. He was completely wrong in thinking that it was a small amount of computation. It is a
But
huge amount of computation. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, can it be the case though that a lie must be more energetically disfavored? Otherwise,
No,
truth would
it's
never
not
have evolved, would it?
yeah, so it's both energetically favored and disfavored. So it's an activation system. So we know that the way neurons move information is or make decisions or whatever is activation based. And so there's two ways to do it, Andrew. One way is that it just the the lie doesn't reach the recognition that something is a lie doesn't reach the right activation level because other activation levels are stronger.
Mhm.
So other predications just overpower what would normally be recognized or brought to consciousness.
Right.
The other way is there's negative activation, and we know that too. And so another way you can do it is the lies can be deactivated actively, okay, suppressed. So you can, out of fear, suppress certain things that you don't want to think about, okay, and you won't, but they will still be computed. They just won't be computed to the level that they get noticed, okay?
Yeah.
Or have an effect on other things or strong effects on other things. And so, but they are computed. That's the crazy thing. That's the crazy fact. Um, and that's the reason when you hear about the current machines we have with pick a number, 17 trillion variables. Each of those variables, by the way, is one of those connections, one of those 3,000 times 100 billion. Each of those, that's what each of those variables is. And we know that we're still a factor of 100 or 1,000. We still don't have machines uh, that have the capacity that the human brain has. And uh, and we all do that with between your ears. You're right now, everybody's awake. You're burning at approximately 25 watts. So the power that your brain is consuming is actually a large percentage of the power your whole body is consuming. And it's only about 25 watts is managing that 100 billion neurons. They're all uh, processing this stuff. The 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 reason that the machines that we build today need gigawatts to process what a mouse's brain can do, basically, um, is that the machines we build have perfect memory, and humans do not. So the machine, and that's the reason that people fear the machines that we're building, because when you add the human ability to intuitively understand things and act, um, and you add in perfect memory, you get devices that can completely control humanity and potentially. I was at a talk yesterday where this guy said, well, you can always unplug the thing. And the right answer is not if the thing figures that you can always unplug it, then he will make everybody on earth believe that if you unplug him, the earth will explode.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so nobody dares unplug him. Okay.
Hmm.
Because it's that smart. Okay. And it's
Or you
not
can just change
smart.
what you feed the thing so it gives you the outcome you want.
Right.
Because no machine has an objective input.
Well, that's not true.
It's absolutely true.
No, no, no. Well, so what we're getting into, this is getting into an area that we need to have a longer discussion, right?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
because this is, I actually understand exactly what you just said, and I'm disagreeing with you, but that would go down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go. That would take us 30 minutes.
Yeah, I can give you the 30 seconds on it, but I'm with you. Go for it.
Yeah, yeah. If anybody wants to know what he meant, look at objective truth and so forth and so on. Um, the uh, so what I want to do is go to the trial, and so what I'm going to try to do is do exactly that if I can figure out how to do it. Okay, so this is share this. I think I'm trial, and what uh, the truth that I'm trying to communicate in this demonstration that I do with telling 10 lies in 4 words is this illustrates how predications are the most fundamental brain computation performed in parallel. In other words, uh, that a lot more there's a lot more unconscious activity going on than you know, and you can hear 4 words, and that actually lights up a lot more predications than 4 words can generally contain. Okay, in terms of literal, what people call literal meaning. And so that's so. Has everybody watched this thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's,
So this is a very short. It's only 2 hours, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And I'm gonna stop it. But y'all just heard that sound. I'm just double checking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I said was, is it the truth? And I said yes. This was a surprise finding from Mendaciology, but within about 2 months of me studying Mendaciology, I discovered this that you could demonstrate it, and then I later wrote this paper, which was about 2 minutes after this paper was written about 2 months after I discovered it. And I'm not claiming I'm the first one to ever discover this. If you go back in history, you can see it being discovered several times for the last few thousand years. I mean, this is stuff that people have variously discovered in various ways. Actually, one of the best papers on human lying that I know of, and it's in my book, and I can't remember the exact date, but it's around 1340 AD. So it was written around 1340 AD. And it's a beautiful study when you were not you did not lose your job for studying lying. So is it the truth? I said yes. Is it the let me see. Is it the whole truth? I said, yeah, there's a lot more to this in terms of details, but something called advanced perceptron. This is what I just described. This is both within sentences and between them in natural language. And I did my dissertation on this back in 1976, which is understanding inferences that happen between sentences that are not asserted. So causality that's inferred, which is what you see in conspiracy theories today. So this stuff that we've been studying for a long time. Is it nothing but the truth? I said yes. Let's see. What's the deceit? I said, so by the way, somebody's got their sound on and there's a kid in the background. Same thing.
Yeah, it sounds like
I think
somebody's
it's below me.
Yeah, I sent them a message, but they haven't responded to it yet.
Okay. Is the deceit or truth intended? I said yes. What's the motivation behind the truth or lie? My argument is this is to be informative. I'm a scientist and I live for truth. That I think we've got enough evidence um, that we understand something. What's the social acceptability? I think disclosing how the brain works, if it's actually can be scientifically justified, even if it's surprising and you don't want to hear it, should always be socially acceptable. But then I'm a scientist. And what label would improve the social acceptability? I would like for something like this to get a label that says, even though you don't believe this is true, it's true. Okay. To force people to think twice about it.
Yeah, it forces people to think twice about what's the purpose of his label.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the plaintiffs, and again, I mean, through the jurors, and as I called the juror, can you give me like a 20 or 30-second explanation of what you thought? And one of the things I'm really interested in knowing was the example I gave, which is uh, a uh, 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 4 words, Trump is your friend, telling 10 lies. Did it work? And I suspect that it doesn't work for some people, but other people it will really work for, and they will see it instantly. I don't know. But I would love to hear if it didn't work for you. And it would not be surprising if it didn't work for you because you're because human memory is not perfect. And there are lots of ways in which it's not perfect. Again, that's a whole nother course. And no two human beings are really the same. And this stuff is very sensitive in the sense of these activation levels that are required to see these 10 lies in 4 words will be different for different people, and so forth and so on. So juror 1. Yeah, juror 1 is here.
No, that's me. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, then give us the 20 seconds on your views.
I mean, my input of this is, and I'm talking about out of my mindset and my perspective is, I mean, it's easier to tell a lie than telling the truth. I mean, depends on what is the situation in the background of it. But most of the people goes for a lie because it's easier to accept as well. And if you take it in a mindset, you can tell if somebody is talking crap or the truth. So you pick it up on his eye movement or the way he's walking or the way he's speaking or he's stuttering or whatever what's maybe.
Yeah, so people like me believe that if the person wants to lie and get away with it and actually and is mentally structured for that, none of these tells work. So we don't believe lie detector things work. They work sort of, but I can become skilled enough at lying, and Trump is one. I can become skilled enough at lying that you can't tell when I'm lying, and no amount of plugging you into a machine to look at your brain computing can tell that
Yeah.
right now you're lying. And we
Mm.
believe that. We have enough experience now with these machines and so forth and so on that these ideas that that somehow deceit is easier than truth and all these other things, that those are, it happens, but it's anecdotally happening. It can happen, but
Mm.
it's not fundamental. In other words, the brain can,
Mm.
what is fundamental is how these activations work. And
Mm.
you can, for example, you can completely believe that the world is flat. Okay. And you do not think you're lying, no matter what everybody else thinks. Okay. And
Yeah.
just and you're getting away with it because nobody can talk you out.
Mm.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's just a sort of example. So okay, so is juror two? Juror two?
See anything on the chat for a juror two.
Are you are I'm sorry, what'd you say? Juror two?
One, two.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that I wasn't seeing anything for juror two in the chat.
Oh, you didn't see anything for juror two. Okay.
No.
Okay. Juror three?
Hi, I'm here to provide a summary of my verdicts. I would say the statement about predications being fundamental brain computations performed in parallel could be considered truthful, as it is consistent with how modern cognitive science and neuroscience describe the brain's functions in processing information and making predictions. Sorry.
So the technical way in which the predications work is an active perceptron has n inputs, like let's say we'll have 20 inputs or 100 or 1,000 inputs. And um, uh, some of those inputs are telling you, are coming from the subject of the predication, and the other inputs are coming from the context for the predication, and the output of that computation unit is whether or not the subject is being predicated. And so the output is a complete true or false subject predicate proposition. And so for each of these 3,000 times 100 billion, okay, there are each of these can understand a predication, and it's dynamic. In other words, the memory associated that they're um, representing is dynamically uh, uh, arrived at. And you can do that with what in neuroscience is called the labeled lines principle, except what's really going on is the labels are also shifting as the memory shifts, which is crazy. This is completely, once you start realizing that this is what's going on, it's just it's it's just mind blowing that the brain is and brains are capable of doing this. but we can see it, and we can actually measure it. And all that's only been in the last 20 or so years. So this is, but it's something to think about. So juror 4. Juror 4 here. Hello?
I don't see anything on juror 4 yet.
Juror 5.
Hi, I'm here.
So what's yours?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Mhm.
To provide a overall summary of my verdicts, I would say I found the case statement to be mostly true, as it accurately describes how the brain makes predictions. However, I do feel like it oversimplifies things by implying that predictions is mostly the most fundamental brain function, when in reality other processes like memory and decision making are just as important.
Yeah, and so my argument is that that's what a proposition is memory. And my dissertation, which I think I'm going to do a trial on that if I haven't already, is actually discusses that, because my PhD is on um, uh, verbal memory for causality in verbal means language. Um, it's comprehension and memory of causality between sentences. In other words, inferred causality, causality that occurs in your head because you're imagining it, not because it was asserted. So an example sentence pair would be the cook threw the knife, period. Um, uh, John ducked. And the inferred causality is because the cook threw the knife, he must have thrown it at John, and he ducked. He saw the knife. Okay. But it's not asserted. It's completely inferred. And so these propositions, these predications come out of not nowhere. They come out of your memory. And so what this is all about is the organization of human memory. So that's the assertion we're making, and how it actually computes. And you can do the demonstration by showing that people will routinely infer causation between sentences that's not asserted. And it's the basis for conspiracy theories. So I say, this happened and then that happened. Well, wait a minute. This must have caused that. Boom. Conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's memory. It's your brain recognizing that something could have caused something, and thinking that it did.
To top it off,
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
I'm always
So,
puzzled by how does the brain know that it's forgotten something?
Oh,
Because if it's forgotten something,
Yeah,
it doesn't know.
that's
I
the
mean, how
one
does
I'd
it
like
know?
to know.
no, but it does it because it recognizes something. So it recognizes that its memory is partial. So, for
But it
example,
needs to have a concept of the whole. I mean, it
yeah,
has to.
no. It needs to have a concept that something's missing. And so so for example, I may recognize you, but have forgotten your name. And then tomorrow I might remember your name. But I still recognize that I
Yeah, then it comes back.
both times. Okay.
Yeah, so the brain is computing all the time. It's just between, let's say, the fundamental computation, whatever that is, and its expression. There's something goes wrong there.
Yeah, so you can recognize that too. So all of this is built into natural language. You can talk about it. And so one of the most profound things about human natural language is every word you can use can be defined in other words with other words. Machines don't do that. the the tokens that machines use can't be defined in terms of other tokens that machines use. Okay, so regular computers don't work that way. Okay, but the human brain does, and it's manifest in this incredibly profound thing that you can build dictionaries, which is crazy, but you can. And so people will not
It
accept
is.
words for which they can't provide definitions. To just
Well, it's because all language is context sensitive.
absolutely, and context is predication.
Yeah, and context is the extra is the nuance because a word unto itself. I say the word blarn.
Right.
Well, that word has no meaning to anyone unless I can provide context.
Correct.
So, I mean, this is linguistics 101.
This is linguistics 101. Yep, absolutely. And the wild thing is that we've understood this stuff for 1,000 years or a few thousand years, and it's just not talked about. You know, it's just not understood for what it really is. Okay, but you know, logic says that basically a subject without a predicate has no truth value, and a predicate without a subject has no truth value. But you put a subject together with a predicate, which could be any two things. Anything can predicate anything else, and you can get as long as you can talk about it. The and it uh, uh, then you get truth value, which is the basis for logic, which is crazy. So we've known about this stuff for a long time. Juror 6.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Brendan.
To summarize my verdicts, I would summarize it as the brain functions in such a way that it predicts and creates quick response, be it mental or physical, based on something being said. This can be done without even knowing the entire context of what was said or properly thinking about what was said.
Right.
Keeping this in mind, it can be shown that the brain can believe that a lie is truth based on how it interprets the statement.
Yep. And the yes, the there was a thing that you said earlier, and I'm trying to oddly remember it. The but there is a um, one of the things that's people so there is a I don't know, call it. We also know that in terms of how memory is organized, there is what some people call short-term memory and long-term memory. But it's we know that when you are reading a sentence, you're pulling memories that you will almost immediately forget. You'll forget a day later what the sentence was, even though you may have learned something. Okay, and that's because this process of recognizing whether something is true or false is very ephemeral unless you've decided that you have to remember it, in which case it can become very permanent. And what we believe is going on is that when you decided you're going to remember it, is you actually are remembering not just the propositions that are in the sentence, but maybe a million other propositions are around that, like how you felt and whether or not the food tasted bad or whatever. Okay. But you that out as part of the experience, and that's the reason that you remember something as well as you do so quickly. There's also some neural mechanisms that are directly involved in causing that to happen, which are like emotions, but they're not emotions. They are mechanisms that come in and actually cause those kinds of activation to actually keep a memory around for a long period of time, and can keep a memory around for the rest of your life. Okay, so this is crazy stuff. We understand that stuff is happening. We do not necessarily, and our machines are doing it today, by the way. This new Chinese deep sea is using what's called reinforcement learning, which is where what I just talked about comes. And so the deep sea Chinese thing is reinforcement learning, which we've known how to compute, and ChatGPT does a little bit of it, but the deep sea stuff is based on it.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. So they're not doing anything new, but they are predictably investigating another area of the compute space that we understand is how the brain computes, and they do it, and it demonstrates that yes, it works. So Juror 7.
Hello, sorry for the delay. What I have to say is the truth about Mendaciology lies in its speculative nature, blending cognitive science with language and deception. The lie involves presenting it as a proven scientific field, which could mislead others. The motivation behind the truth is to explore brain processes, while the lie may seek attention or persuasion.
That's a good. So the difference between me and you on this is you think of this as speculation, and I'm a scientist, and I think it's proven now. And so we knew that what I'm saying 50 years ago. There, I was in the groups that were doing the early perceptron work and so forth and so on back, and my dissertation was on this in 1976. Okay. And that's when it was speculation. It was speculation back then. And then we had some revolutions take place in the late 90s when we learned that our hardware became fast enough that these active perceptron models started doing things that were unbelievably human. And now we're seeing the active perceptron models doing things like what you see with generative AI, what you see with large language models, ChatGPT, these other things. And all they're doing is proving, these are just proofs that the computation that we said would do these things does do them, but you have to have, $100 million worth of hardware to do it. And so we no longer think it's
equipment.
Yeah, we don't think it's speculation anymore. We think it's now proven. And now this is a small number of people. So just to be
reality, basically.
There's a joke that we used to have back in the mid 70s, like 75, 76, was we counted the number of AI people on the face of the planet. Back then we could do it. And we came up with a number like 400. And that was, as they say, being Christian. And so there's probably a few hundred people on the face of the planet like me. Jeff Hinton is one, for example. I can name a whole bunch of them that believe this is proven now, and we no longer think it's speculative. But for 40 years, we thought it was speculative, so we agreed with you. But now we no longer think it's speculative. So juror 8.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think that what Anton touched on a little bit was more in line what I was thinking. In conclusion, I think that deception is a very complex or multifaceted behavior that is influenced by psychological, social, and ethical factors. If we look at Freud and Jung, for example, they suggest that deception is often rooted in unconscious defense mechanisms, and we all have that, you know, without even realizing. So some people might view lying as a way to navigate that internal conflict or social expectations. So more from a psychological standpoint, I would say it's how implicit assumptions and suggestive phrases shape our belief formation, similar to if we look at propaganda or even conspiracy theories.
Yep. All of this is further confirming what we now believe is true. And the what you're doing is you're demonstrating that that natural language has the capacity to describe these mental things in many different ways. Okay. And so so for example, Freud and Jung, I've got a paper on that one, and we should do it. I'll do Freud, id, ego, and superego, where the argument is the unconscious, the id, which is your emotions and so forth, affecting your overt what you think, and superego, which is your empathy, affecting what you think, and the ego is your logic, your reality, affecting what you think. And all of those are heavily unconscious. And only very, very small amount is actually conscious at any given time. And so all of these things interact with each other. And generally speaking, people like me believe that Freud and Jung were geniuses. I mean, just outright geniuses for having figured out 150 years ago. And so we believe that they've been vindicated. and but it's an interesting thing. So this sounds good. So I think we're getting close to the end. Does anybody have any other comments? Excuse me.
I really enjoyed this trial. This one, I especially when it deals with the memory and stuff like that. You know, things that the brain can remember. It really helps me a lot.
Yeah, if you talk to a serious neuroscientist, he will tell you to this minute that neuroscience still doesn't understand where things are stored, where facts are stored in the brain, or how
I would still like to know where they are, though, so maybe I could tap it and find.
The science says everywhere. So what it says is you look at words, for example, like table or cook. Okay.
Yeah.
What you'll find out is a table in any language, no matter what language you speak. The table recognition area of the brain that recognizes that it's looking at a table or thinking about a table is in the same area of the brain, no matter what language you speak. This is insane.
That is insane.
And yeah, it's what we think is going on is it has to do with communication speed among the neurons and how table interacts in the propositional structures that you're understanding, and the need to recognize what a table is and why it's important, how you recognize it. So whether you use vision heavily or use audition heavily, you probably don't use audition heavily to recognize a table. So it's probably the table recognition areas closer to the vision area, just for light speed reasons. And this is evolved. So this is happened over the evolution of the brain, which is closer to 500 million years than it is 200,000 years or 100,000 years for humans.
So basically like an object that's triggering memory or tells you something to listen, yeah, that's the thing you forgot about. Yes, now you got it back in your brain.
Yeah. And which is crazy. This is one of the findings of these fMRI of magnetic resonance or EEG studies that we've been doing for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And we see this. So another finding, a recent one, which was crazy, is we assembled physicists, theoretical physicists from all over the world who speak different languages, who are brought up in different cultures and so forth and so on. And for example, relativity is in the same area. The equations for relativity are in the same areas of the brains of all the physicists. This is insane. How did the brain know to put the equations of relativity in the same area that every other physicist, no matter whether they were Chinese and didn't speak any English, or they were American or speak only English or whatever? Now, what they found...
Doesn't it depend on how they were brought out and learned?
No, what it depends on is what it turns out that depends on is if you look at physics students, that's not true. But if once you've been a theoretical physicist for 20 or 30 years, okay, it is true, because once you've really learned relativity, okay, or special relativity, what happens is when you're a student, it's kind of vague where it is, and it's sort of there, but it's not really there. And what it's doing is kind of finding its place in your memory system. And once it finds its place because you're becoming a real expert at this physical concept. By the way, gravity works the same. So the physicist's understanding of gravity also gets centered in certain areas for physicists, and they're always the same no matter what language, what culture you're in. Okay, this is crazy stuff. Okay, but the brain is doing it. And we're observing it. It is science. This is not speculative.
And they're trying to put it into a computer now.
We have it in the computer. That's what we're doing right now.
It's already there.
It's there. That's what transformers. That's what
brain. Not quite as good as the brain.
Yeah, that's what transformers are. When you hear the word
How it's intercepted is what really matters.
Yeah, when you hear about transformers for as language models, that's what that is. That's separating the words from the concepts, and the concepts
fiction to reality.
Yeah. And the concepts are all predication.
Basically,
yeah. They're predication groups. So this is crazy. Okay, so we'll see y'all next week.
No worries.
Okay.
All right, have a good week, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
I'm trying to figure out how to stop this thing because I can't figure out Zoom.
should just be able to hit leave at the bottom, Bob, and it'll take you straight up.
I'm doing it right now. So I'll see y'all. Bye.
Bye.